With the signing of Goran Dragic, the Chicago Bulls roster is all but set for 2022-2023. Let's talk about where they stand in the Eastern Conference and how we think they're going to fare this season, starting now. Now, if you are new to the channel, please like the video. Please subscribe to the page. We do talk Chicago Bulls daily on this channel. It's the only channel talking Chicago Bulls, how Chicago talk. So make sure that you get in tune with us, man. So here's the thing, right? When we're looking at this Bulls roster after signing Goran Dragic yesterday, this roster is all but set. When you're talking about what's going to be on the team for the 2022-2023 Bulls: Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic, Lonzo Ball, Alex Caruso, Patrick Williams, Ayo Dosunmu, Kobe White, Derrick Jones Jr., Dalen Terry, Javonte Green, Andre Drummond, Goran Dragic, Tony Bradley, Marko Simonovic, Justin Lewis on a two-way deal. And that second two-way deal, interesting because a qualifying offer was extended to Malcolm Hill, but it does not seem like Malcolm Hill has yet signed that offer, so that could go to somebody else. But that's another right two-way spot up and down. Somebody you hope you don't see play a ton of basketball this season. So kind of just looking at that roster, right, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I feel good about that team. I know there's a lot of people, right, that look at that roster and they're like, listen, we didn't do anything, we didn't make any drastic changes, we didn't go out and get anything to add to this roster. But I've been saying this the entire time, right? The biggest thing you can add to this roster is health. Our big day in free agency was last season, and so I'm okay with going out there to war with Zach LaVine, Lonzo Ball, DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic, and Patrick Williams. The biggest question mark around that is, are those guys going to be healthy enough to be on the court? I guess if you look at the roster, right, there's kind of a little bit of a slight frame at that power forward position. Outside of Patrick Williams, right, there's not a lot of big bodies that you can throw down there. There's not a lot of guys that you look at and say, oh, yeah, this guy's going to be a great power forward for us. Hopefully, Justin Lewis can become that. I think you might see him get a little bit of playing time at that backup four spot. And hopefully Marko Simonovic as well, right? And it's just unknown kind of at that backup four spot. But as I look at this roster matched up with the rest of the Eastern Conference, right, I still feel good about it. And here's another thing, right? A lot of those teams that had those drastic changes, I know we look at these teams and we say, but they got better, but they did this, but they got better, right? And listen, some of them did. The Atlanta Hawks, you can talk about as a team that got better by adding DeJounte Murray, right? And the New York Knicks adding Jalen Brunson. They're going to be a better team probably than they were last year. I don't think that adds a lot of wins on, but I think they'll be a better team than they were last year. But here's what's something that I'm really focusing on when we're talking about this Bulls team. When I'm looking at the names that are here, the fact that 90% of this roster already understands how to play together. In fact, they're all playing together right now out in LA. About 10 of those names are playing together out in LA, getting a workout in. I think Billy Donovan's out there as well, which we won't speak on that. A little bit of tampering over there. What are we doing out there, Billy? Relax, brother. But when you're looking at, right, like how this team's made up, where this team is going to be able to start the season and how they're going to be able to attack this thing, right, they got to hit the ground running. And guess what? They're doing that, and they can do that because this team has been together. This is a team that already has time built up. Continuity is something that's been very important to AK, and so that's something that will definitely come into play, and I think that plays a big part into what the Chicago Bulls team can do. Again, go back and relook at some of that time where they were at the beginning of the season, how they were running these teams, how they were attacking these teams. I know I said it here, and that they were playing weaker teams or teams that were sub 500, some of those teams, right? But I think back to that West Coast trip, even without Vooch out there, right? Because he was dealing with some COVID, how the Bulls were just running teams. I think back to those early games versus Boston, those early games versus Brooklyn, where the Bulls were just out there literally running up and down the court on teams, the pace of play, everything they wanted to do. Lonzo Ball getting the ball out, Zach LaVine running, DeMar DeRozan finishing at the cup. Yeah, I mean, like all of those things were coming into play so early into the season, because this Bulls team had built up that time in the offseason together. Guess what? They're doing that again. And so I feel really good about where this Bulls roster could be heading into 2022. I believe that they will end up being a top 4 roster in the Eastern Conference, especially as you look at some of the other teams around them. And I feel like they're going to leapfrog a lot of these teams that we feel like could be threats in the Eastern Conference. But as always, man, I do want to know how you guys feel. Let me know in the comments below. I'll be down there talking with you as well. How do you feel like this Bulls roster stacks up in the Eastern Conference? Where does this team rank? Let me know in the comments below. I'll be down there talking with you guys as always. So here's the other thing for me, right? When I'm looking at this Bulls roster, how do they match up versus some of the other teams that are already here? Listen, the Brooklyn Nets are the one, I guess, outlier team, right? Because they got Kevin Durant and Kyrie, and now TJ Warren and Ben Simmons. But is that team going to play together? That's a real question. That's a question mark that I have on that team all the time. So I don't know where I really put Brooklyn in this whole equation. But when I look at this team right and how they match up against Milwaukee, I think the Bulls matched up against Milwaukee pretty well last season. You saw that a lot of those games, even when we were missing very key pieces, and I'm not talking about even just the playoffs, right? Just in the season, we're missing very key pieces. The Bulls were able to compete with Milwaukee. They were able to fight it out with Milwaukee in a lot of those games outside of one. I think we got blown out during the regular season once. But outside of that, right, like, when I look at how we match up with them, again, what am I looking at? Health. Because if I've got a healthy Zach LaVine, if I've got a healthy DeMar DeRozan, if I've got a healthy Lonzo Ball, if I have a healthy Kobe White, if I have all these guys, right, my shooting is better. And the Brooklyn Nets, I'm sorry, the Milwaukee Bucks gave you the blueprint to how to beat them. Like, it's literally just knock down some shots. It's not like they're playing this, oh my goodness, deep concept defense that the Bulls couldn't overcome. The Bulls just couldn't knock down a single shot. It was to the point where even Bucks fans said you guys would beat us if you could knock down a shot, but the Bulls just couldn't knock down a shot. So if this Bulls team is healthy coming into the season, right, I think they play the Milwaukee Bucks completely different. Not to say that we're going to blow the Bucks out, but I think that we compete with them a lot better. I think that we sit a little bit tougher than they do on the outside. Now, of course, right, you have a superstar in the middle in Giannis. There's nothing the Bulls are going to be able to do about that. As good as Patrick Williams will be, I believe, as a defender, there's nothing Patrick Williams will be able to do about that. There's some players that you just can't stop. Giannis is that player. If you find me the guy that can stop him, get him for the Bulls, because that dude is a monster in the NBA. And don't send me PJ Tucker. Yeah, I mean, don't talk about PJ Tucker right now. Although maybe he did just get 30 million. So maybe that's what it comes down to. I'm gonna be real with you as well, right? Looking at some of the other teams now, Milwaukee's a tough one. I'm not gonna say that the Bulls are better than Milwaukee, because Milwaukee's got championship experience and where they're going, and the Bulls are trying to get to that level of being able to get above them. But I do think that the Bulls compete with Milwaukee really well coming into this season, especially if they're healthy. Some of the other teams that I look at, the Philadelphia 76ers, I don't believe in that team at all. I don't believe in that team because of how they're made up, right? Like, your big splash acquisition was PJ Tucker. All right, he's going to help your defense, right? Joel Embiid's an unstoppable force down there. Okay, but we're talking about overall, right? Do we feel like that's a team that's going to get the job done with James Harden? Tobias Harris averages were terrible with James Harden last season. His shooting percentage was down. He was only averaging about 14 points a game. I think rebounding was like 4 or 5 rebounds a game, something like that, right? So like all of a sudden he's fallen out of favor. He turned into this corner shooter. I do like Tyrese Maxey on that team. I will say I think that he's a nice piece that they have as an addition to that, but just the scheme that they kind of run, right? It just didn't seem like it worked last season, and it's the same scheme to me that they were running with Chris Paul and Blake Griffin out in Los Angeles with the Clippers, right? That same style of play, but this time Joel Embiid is your number one instead of Chris Paul being your number one. So I feel like, right, like that situation isn't going to change too much. I don't think Philly's this, oh my God, blow you out the water team. I haven't believed in them all off season. I didn't believe in them much last season. And I thought that I thought the Philly team without James Harden was a better team overall because it was better suited for the guy that you have as your star in your team in Joel Embiid. So I feel like that's going to be a situation where James Harden has been on, what, 3 teams in 3 years? That's another situation that's probably going to get ready to implode in a couple of years. I'm not worried about them in the slightest to me. Boston kind of stands out. I can't say the Bulls have a better roster than Boston. Where I look at that Boston team, right, and I feel like that team was already great and they got better, and now they have that finals experience. They have deep playoff run experience already, and they added Malcolm Brogdon to that team. I think that's a game-changing piece for them. I think they're going to be a tough team to beat. I do think the Bulls can match up with them, and we saw the Bulls match up with them a little bit a couple of times last season, right? But I think if you're talking about like the long run, a 7-game series, Boston would be a tough team. That will probably be the one team I don't want to see out of the Eastern Conference, because I think that they just match up really well versus the Chicago Bulls right now. And some of the other teams they have sitting above us in the power rankings. The Toronto Raptors is a team that we pretty much handled for the most part last season. I thought it was some fun times, some good games and stuff like that. And I think Scotty Barnes definitely takes a leap this season, but I also think that some of the Bulls players that were doing really well in that game, like Ayo Dosunmu and guys like that, take a leap this season as well. So I think we kind of match up with them somewhat evenly, but I think the Bulls still have come out ahead in that. I would take right now Zach LaVine over Scotty Barnes, just because I think he's at more of a developed point. And then for me, right, like the Miami Heat's kind of that other team that sat above us. They're an interesting team because I don't feel like they got better. Jimmy's hair got longer, but I mean, outside of that, right, I don't feel like the Miami Heat did a lot to get better this offseason. I don't know if they believe in Tyler Hero. I don't know if they believe in Duncan Robinson, right? I think Strus is going to be an interesting piece. He was a guy they started relying on last season. Ole is a nice pickup for them. I think having him around and hopefully having him finally for a healthy season will make a big difference for the Miami Heat in that situation. But y'all know how I am with Kyle Lowry, bro. Kyle Lowry's that's not my guy for me, right? That's not the guy that I'm worried about to me. So I think there's a lot of interesting pieces on that team. Not to say they're not still a top team in the Eastern Conference, but I think the Bulls can match up with them. And remember, the Bulls were one of those teams that right there I think this is the part that a lot of Bulls fans forget, right? Like the Bulls, when they were healthy, were one of the best defensive teams in the NBA, and they were one of the best defensive teams right behind Miami. So I think the Bulls defensively can match up with them pretty well. And I think that the Bulls are just gonna, I do believe that the Chicago Bulls will take a step this season. I think they'll finish as a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference. That's my expectation. And listen, they're trying to hit the ground running. They're already out there working out. They're already out there trying to get their game honed in and ready for the season. It looks like they're trying. It looked to me, right, like Patrick Williams in the short video that we saw of it was on a team by himself without Zach LaVine and DeMar. I don't know if that's facts or not. It just looked like DeMar and Zach, when I saw them kind of were on the defensive end when I saw Patrick Williams with the ball in his hand. So if he's got that, if they're kind of putting him on his own, trying to get him to take a step here, I expect him to be somebody that gets involved more in the offensive game, and that could be a game changer thing for the Bulls as well. I like how this roster's made up. I'm not gonna lie to you. I feel like this is a good team, and I feel like this Bulls team is gonna be a lot of fun to watch this season. I do want to know how you guys feel though, man. Let me know in the comments below. How do you feel the Chicago Bulls team fares versus the rest of the Eastern Conference? How do you feel like this roster makeup is? Do you feel better about this team coming into this season, or do you feel like they just didn't do enough? Let me know in the comments below. I'll be down there talking with you as well. As always, man, it's your boy Pat the Designer, back at it again to continue watching our Chicago Bulls content. Click the links on the screen or check the links in the description below. Y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. Peace.